Hey guys, Kuyo here, and today, as kind of a follow-up to my recent Prey video, recent in terms of my video production process I'd like to begin delving into Prey lore, and just generally exploring its alternate history and universe. Hopefully in the process uncovering new things about said universe that some of you may not know, or even act as a gateway into the game for those of you who haven't played it. So with that said, the topic at hand for this video is one that I've debated a lot on how I want to go about handling. That topic being the Typhons, with myself looking at how I would go about talking about them. To which I've come to the conclusion that I do so by giving each type its own separate video. That said, the one I've decided to start the series with is perhaps the most enigmatic of the bunch. And one that's notoriously a problem, even in Prey's late game. That of course being the one and only Phantom. A Typhon that I hope to cover today, and hopefully get the viewers up to spec on its capabilities, origin, and the like. Roll that intro. Now to start this video, I think briefly explaining, as I'd rather give the backstory of the Typhon their own video, what the Typhon are would be a good place to begin. That being that the Typhon are an extraterrestrial form of life discovered aboard a Soviet satellite in 1958. From here, through a series of events concerning the united efforts of the US and Soviet Russia, a joint project would be conducted in order to study them, though that would end in failure and eventually the adoption of the project by the megacorporation Transtar. Moving on from how they were discovered, the Typhon have quite the strange biology. That being that they're seemingly made out of a substance that's simultaneously a liquid, solid, and gas at the same time, with their bodies being able to change at will, and subsequently allowing for them to accomplish tasks that would never be possible out of a terrestrial life form, i.e. something like their various forms of telekinesis. On top of this, like I kinda mentioned earlier, Typhon come in a variety of different shapes and sizes, to which I'll refer to as species, with each unique species having different abilities and niches in the Typhon ecosystem. All of which I'd love to continue talking about, but once again would be too much to contain in a video about one of those specific species of Typhon. Moving on then to the subject of today's video, we have essentially the fighter or main predator in the Typhon ecosystem, at least before another Typhon shows up, the Phantom, otherwise known by its fictional scientific name, Typhon anthrophantasmus, where its variations add on to that title. Now to talk about phantoms means that I'll have to talk about how this form of Typhon comes into existence, though to prevent overlap I won't go too heavily into detail. That being that Typhons, just in general, come into being because of another type of Typhon known as Weavers. Now, from what we've seen in the game, their starting point is typically from another type of Typhon known as Mimics, which are made by the Weavers, which through some form of metamorphosis combine to become other types of Typhon, in this case the Phantom. However, unlike other types of Typhon, Phantoms are really different. See, a major thing about Typhons, just as a species, is a detail I didn't mention. That they, somehow, have neurons, or at least something similar to neurons. But unlike many other organisms like those on Earth, they lack mirror neurons. Initially, this may seem like a strange thing to mention. But when it comes to how we understand mirror neurons in real life, there's quite a bit of controversy around them. But in the case of Prey, the game attributes these mirror neurons to being the thing that allows for organisms to feel empathy, and more so, even feel that they exist. As a result of not having these mirror neurons then, Typhon can't really see like we do, or feel emotion like we do. That is until you look at something like the Phantom. See, the Phantom's unique origin comes in the form that, while it can be created like other types of Typhon, like I mentioned earlier, it can also be raised up from dead humans, as we see multiple times throughout the game. For this reason, Phantoms are perhaps the most sophisticated of all of the Typhons, as they manage to at least maintain some aspect of their, what I assume to be, human host, though I'll get into the implications of that in just a bit. As for the Phantom's abilities in rather unique form, just like with all the Typhon, the Phantom is made up of the same multi-phase shiny blackish material. But outside of that, they're also the only humanoid-shaped Typhon in the entire ecosystem, outside of the Nightmare that is. Now, this little characteristic circles back around to what I mentioned about the Phantoms being essentially based off the human form. and as such, perhaps alongside the addition of them having human hosts on some occasions, allows for them to mimic what seems like human speech and even some human actions. This is where I feel that phantoms, while just generally different from the other Typhon, make their biggest difference known, in that they, while apparently still not having mirror neurons, begin mimicking a lot of very human things, specifically in how they'll recall the player character's name upon spotting them, or how they'll start talking about things that only an employee aboard the space station might do. I think it's also going to be at this bit that I'm going to start theorizing a bit on why I think such behaviors occur. And it has a little to do with how I think the phantoms somehow gain some form of access to those neurons that humans have, or just human biology in general. And, quick spoiler warning, as this part talks about the end of the game, which you can skip to this point if you don't want to hear about, may even be how Alex managed to create the Typhon-human hybrid at the end of the game. That is, by studying how the phantoms managed to integrate human biology into themselves. But enough with this theorizing on what exactly phantoms are when it comes to their biology. As when it comes to their physicality, or rather their more telekinetic aspects, they are greatly different from humans. Specifically in how phantoms are able to seemingly teleport when in the presence of prey, see what I did there? And more so in their various telekinetic abilities. That said, there is some form of physics related to all of this, and only some aspects are purely fiction. Those being that while they look to be instantly jumping across the room while chasing down potential targets for consumption, phantoms are really just phasing the atoms in their bodies at incredible speeds in extremely small intervals. What this allows for them to do is shift all the air molecules around them, hence moving at breakneck speeds over a given distance. At first, this makes no sense, but it's kind of a part of the whole fiction part of science fiction, and can be pretty much all thrown into this strange silvery substance that their body is made up of. A substance that might also be the reason as to why phantoms have a limited form of telekinesis in their base variety, where they can move objects and cause explosions while attempting to look for things or when hunting. It's also here where I think I can start talking about the variety of subspecies, as I'll deem them, in the phantom species. Those being Typhon Anthrophantasmus Psychothermal, Typhon Anthrophantasmus Psychoetheric, and Typhon Anthrophantasmus Psychovoltaic, otherwise known as the thermal, etheric, and voltaic phantoms. What these phantoms can do is seemingly an upgrade based on various environmental factors to what the base phantom can do, in that something like the thermal phantom can superheat molecules within its body and around it to essentially become pyrokinetic, or otherwise produce fire, or in how the voltaic phantom can utilize electricity in a similar fashion. All of which circles back around to another key aspect of the Typhon, something that we here on Earth have never seen at such a massive scale: rapid adaptation to a changing environment. You see, with a normal organism, adaptation and hence evolution occurs at a snail's pace, with small changes taking ages to appear in a population, and larger ones taking thousands of years at the least. In the case of Typhons, however, their presumably genetic code, maybe through something like horizontal gene transfer, allows for them to adapt to any new environment that they exist within on the fly, changing to suit whatever they need to within only one generation of encountering such a stimuli, all of which is extremely apparent in the phantoms, with the voltaic phantoms, for example, appearing in areas like the power plant, and things like the etheric phantom, which can create a toxic gas and multiply itself, appearing in places like the Arboretum. So, just as a bit of a summary to help wrap up this brief video on phantoms, phantoms are a predatory extraterrestrial form of life that spawned out of the existence of humans, with their various abilities and even behaviors being the apparent result of them being a mix of Typhon and human biology. On top of that, it seems that as we play through the game, that the Typhon ecology has managed to incorporate the human-like aspects that phantoms took from humans back into itself, making it so that humans are no longer needed to create phantoms, and so that the ecology can create a predator to combat the player character in the game itself, otherwise known as the Nightmare. But with that, I think I've covered a lot about the phantoms. So, in order to bring this video to its end, I think I'll try to incorporate a bit of philosophy the game itself uses when discussing Typhons. One that relates a lot in how we see the phantoms as enemies. That being that, unlike humans, Typhons don't really see the world. All they see is prey in other Typhons. So, by going about applying human characteristics to an organism that is barely even like anything we've ever seen in the first place, is a really strange thing to do. Yet, throughout all of Prey, we see it becoming more and more apparent that the game wants us to keep combing over the belief that the Typhons are just monsters without coherent thought. Because, as we come to find out, they are, in fact, just animals hunting for food. Neither good nor evil. Yet, there's a preciseness in their actions. Something that we can't quite put our fingers on until the last moments of the story, when everything seems like it's over. And that's the idea of what exactly defines sentience. Is it the ability to contemplate thought and act on it? Because then, Typhons may have a speed. But if it's the ability to empathize and communicate emotion, then maybe it's not. All of it being that Prey asks us what makes us, us. And just like with phantoms, maybe what makes us like we are isn't as simple as incorporating our biology into something else. With that, thanks for watching this very first episode of the Prey 2017 lore series over on this channel. Like I promised a few weeks back, I'm going to continue to do these kinds of videos, both in the case of Dishonored and Prey, maybe other games too. So please, tell me what you thought, any potential inaccuracies you may have seen, what I could improve, and questions you may have in general. And never forget, it's all just a mind game. Kuyo out.
It's time to beat the mind game.